thanks to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to give this talk to this great audience. And I will present this work that I've been doing as a postdoc with Dr. Jamie Van Cleef at the University of Kentucky. So let's start first with, thank you also to the great introduction to altruism that previous speakers have done. Altruistic behaviors are those where an individual helps other at the expense of a sacrifice. This sacrifice can imply in terms of survival or fecundity. And this can be understood in this simple intuition that helping genetically related individuals directly replicates the ones of the altruists. Actually, Haldane jokingly would say that he would die for 2 brothers or 8 cousins, and this comes from back of the envelope kinship relationships. If we go to the extreme cases in the nature, comes up examples of ants in which every ant has the potential to differentiate into a queen or a worker, and the workers are functionally sterile, whereas the queen is the one that is reproducing at the expense of the work of the workers. So the workers will be the altruistic option and the queen the selfish option. So one way to understand altruism is by means of the Hamilton's rule, which depends on very simple terms, which is the fitness benefit received from related cooperative neighbors, the relatedness between the focal individual and its neighbors, and the fitness cost of the cooperative interactions. If this, if the benefit offsets the cost, then it's predicted that altruism will be selected. Just to a note is that we are interested in fecundity altruism for the rest of the talk. And we are interested in mechanisms that would increase this relatedness. Actually, more specifically, those mechanisms that doesn't depend in being able to recognize the kin. These would be population structure and the other link selection. So for the population structure case, where there are a lot of DIMs connected through migration events, this FST statistic can be used as a proxy for the relatedness, because originally Hamilton's rule was developed with kinship relationships, but we can extend it when we are studying metapopulations. Whereas for link selection, just a small reminder is that whenever there are selected sites touching to neutral loci, these can influence their neutral diversity in a nearby region. And of all these types of link selection, we are interested in the ones that involve deleterious mutations, which is this one. It's called background selection. Maybe so. In a single population, it is known that deleterious mutations just remove genetic diversity. But when you compare another team of an already structured population, this can produce further differentiation when you compare the local diversities in each team. And this effect can be abolished via recombination, because that would allows the neutral alleles to escape, to break down their association with the deleterious alleles. So in this background selection phenomena, deleterious mutations are rapidly eliminated, and this would have an effect on the FST and the effective population size. And these effects are measured on the surviving haplotypes, which are free of deleterious mutations. And one of the first expressions for studying this reduction factor was developed by Charlesworth and Hodgson and Kaplan. Actually, currently, there are more complicated expressions for this by papers of Ben Good and Hassan and Whitlock. And these expressions depend on the deleterious mutation rate, on the heterozygote selection coefficient of deleterious mutations, and the total recombination rate. So unlike the structure case, which is only dependent on the migration, background selection is a little bit more complex because it involves more properties or parameters. So a reduction in the effective population size is expected, and an increase in the FST of the focal genomic region is expected too. So as for the altruistic model that I'm going to describe, is just a single locus altruistic, locus, and has two alleles. The first allele produces a selfish phenotype, and the second, which is a mutant, an altruistic behavior. And there's this relative fitness that will depend also on the benefit received from the neighbors. That is, that the benefit is a public good, and only the altruists will pay the cost for this interaction. So this is, I'm going to present two demographies. This is the first one, which I call the baseline model, in which there's just reproduction, and there's migration, individual migration events. There's individual competition. This is mostly Wright-Fisher dynamics. Whereas the alternative model is the propagule dispersal and propagule competition, in which there's a stage in which the juveniles migrate together in small groups, and there's a stage of group competition to occupy whole patches. And this is followed by an adult migration, just similarly to the baseline scenario. So just for short, the first one is the baseline model, the second is the group competition model. So as for the simulations that I'm going to show you, these are the demographic parameters that I'm going to use. For the baseline model, I'm using 10 DIMs. For the group competition model, 200 DIMs. They're the same DIM size, which is 500 individuals, just Wright-Fisher dynamics. As for the genetic architecture, I will have a central neutral focal region in which all the links are totally linked, and they are flanked by a couple of deleterious regions in which there's recombination. Exactly the center of this focal region will be the altruistic locus. These are the mutation rates that I'm considering as for the deleterious mutations or as for the neutral mutations. And this is the implied deleterious genomic mutation rate. So for each point that you see comes from 150 replicates. The altruistic allele is introduced after the mutation selection balance for background selection, and is introduced as at a 50% frequency. There's a burning period proportional to the predicted effective population size, and the FST is calculated for the focal region. I used this forward in time simulation platform known as SLIM. So as for the baseline model, first, you're seeing the difference between the FST with background selection minus FST with no background selection. And this is plotted against the migration rate. So as I was telling you earlier, background selection depends on the selection coefficient and the recombination. So of all these a variety of combinations, at the top left corner is where background selection is maximum. As you increase recombination, you abolish the effect. And also, if you make two deleterious, you would also abolish the effect. So the most interesting part is at this corner. The maximum effect of increasing the FST is peaking at a limited dispersal. Whereas for the group competition, there's a similar trend, except for the fact that it's not peaking at a side. It follows more like a saturation point. So those were the results for the background selection. There is still no altruism. And now going back to the altruism part, it is known that for the baseline model, the increase in the offspring by the altruistic interactions would be canceled out by the increased local competition. So the fact that you're having individual competition and individual migration, you're canceling out whatever altruistic behavior could be selected for. Whereas the group competition model, given that groups are being kept together, relatedness is being maintained, and the competition is among groups instead of individuals. Actually, it's been reviewed, this inclusive fitness effect and these conditions for each of the models. And as you can see, the baseline model doesn't depend on the relatedness itself, as opposed to the group competition case, in which there's actually the driving force is the relatedness itself. But for the strength of selection for these for the altruistic allele, it depends on the effective population size too. So whereas the FST effect is similar for both models, there are opposite trends for the effective population size. For the group competition, you're seeing the more limited the dispersal, the lower the effective population size. So there are like two conflicting effects of background selection and the strength of altruism in the group competition model. So it's both increasing relatedness, but it's also decreasing effective population size. So to understand better what's happening, maybe I'm going to show you. So for the baseline model, in here you're seeing the relative probability of fixation. This is the temperature gradient. So any warm color is positive selection and cold color is negative selection. And you're seeing the role of dispersal against the benefit. So in here, there is no shifting in the neutral expectation, and you're only seeing different strengths of selection as you increase the selection coefficient of the background of the heterogeneous alleles. Whereas for the group competition, you start to see interesting parts. So the interesting part in here is that you would see when you compare what's happening with the background selection and no background selection, there is a gap in which is being more advantageous, or the background selection is widening the region in which altruistic behaviors are advantageous. So we chose two migration rates to show you some simulations. Again, the interesting part is the left top corner for the background selection. This is with a low migration, and as you can see, is shifting the threshold for the evolution of altruism. And this effect is actually counterintuitively is increased when there is a high migration. This gap between the background selection and no background selection is widened with the background selection. So the take-home messages is that background selection and dispersal could act jointly to increase relatedness and thus facilitate the evolution of altruism. And this background selection effect is strongly dependent on demography. And this framework this framework could offer some guidelines as to where to look altruistic alleles in the genome, if there was to be any altruistic alleles, maybe in regions with background selection. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the story that I wanted to tell. And I thank the NSF for the funding and University of Kentucky.
We have time for questions. I have a question. It's just like very intuitively, background selection, I would think like, okay, it takes some, it acts over some time, and it reduces population size over those time scales. And if you made it so that like within Deem, interactions are happening quickly, between Deem more slowly, I would think, oh, background selection would reduce the overall between Deem population size, but not affect within Deem population size. But that would actually make FST go down. So I'm just like totally off somewhere. Is it possible to make FST go down with background selection?
That would be in a combination of parameters in which you're increasing, because FST depends on the heterozygosity of wood. So you would have to make like decrease more the heterozygosity between Deems than the within Deems. So I cannot like right now to think of a, because yeah, I mean, maybe we should talk later about that, because it's tricky. It's tricky. I know.
We have time.
Yeah, so I was sort of curious on your plots about the change in the fixation probability. At least in these cases, it always seemed like at most a factor of 2. Do you think that's because of the background selection parameters you were using, delta mutation rate, or would it be possible to make it 10 times or 100 times more likely to evolve altruism?
So you mean in so your question was why there was some mismatch between the simulation and
just why the overall magnitude maybe is only a factor of 2, like your p fix minus the neutral expectation was sort of at most 2 in a lot of those plots I noticed. So I'm curious, could you make it, is it possible to make it 10 or 100 by choosing the parameters the right way? Or is there something special about these conflicting effects that they?
Oh, no, it's actually not dependent on the parameters themselves. This conflicting effect, that's something that is due to their own demographic structure.